but when you get to the numbers between 45 and 54, the numbers start to increase dramatically because now you're starting to get into closer to your peak earning years. You're making real amounts of money. Sure. You're getting promoted a couple times, right? So that's where the average net worth jumps up to about $975,000 between 45 and 54.
If you're sitting there hitting your head against a wall going, I can't figure out how to make my business sellable at some point in time down the road, you maybe need to get some consultations with somebody, have it analyzed, talk to a business coach. There's any number of different ways you can go about it, but please make sure, I love the way you phrase that. Do you own a business or are you self-employed? Because there's a big difference between the two. All
right. Welcome back to another edition of the Retirement Planning Happy Hour. Eric Douglas, Chris Vaughn, Family Wealth Planning Partners in beautiful, sunny Louisville, Kentucky. Best week of the year in the city of Louisville anyway. We are recording this during Derby week, Derby Day to be specific.
Today is Derby, that's right.
Normally we record on Fridays, but as per tradition in the city of Louisville, our offices will be closed on Oaks Day, so we're trying to knock out some content here.
If you're not from this area, then you don't truly understand the Friday of Derby week. We call it Oaks Day. Yeah. Nobody in this town actually accomplishes anything on Oaks Day. It's a tradition.
Well, it was actually funny. So this morning I was driving my son to school, and we kind of got into a conversation like, just a reminder, early dismissal today.
Right.
Plus you're off school tomorrow. Just a reminder, like not that he forgot that he was going to be off school tomorrow, but like just a reminder, we're off school tomorrow. I'll be off with you, et cetera. And he said, so does like everybody else in the country get off on Friday? And I said, nope. We're definitely unique in this city.
In fact, it's not just it's not just the whole country that does not participate. It's the surrounding communities. This is a Louisville thing.
It's very much a city thing.
The surrounding counties are not out of school tomorrow, but Louisville, Jefferson County is, and I don't remember it not being. And I think where that comes from is many years ago, before it got a little bit more corporate. Oaks Day we called it Louisville's Day at the Races.
The local day, yeah.
Well, they didn't have school that day because there were not enough substitute teachers, because the teachers, just like everybody else, were like, nope, I'm going to the track today, right? That was just kind of where the tradition came from.
Well, yeah. So obviously they started closing down schools, and what's kind of interesting, and as I was talking to my son about this morning, I started kind of thinking through and realizing it's not even really just Friday anymore. Basically the entire week of Derby now in the city of Louisville is almost just pointless to be coming to the office.
Right. Well, once upon a time, Derby Festival was 1 week long, and if you're not from this area, you thought this was just a 2-minute horse race.
Yeah.
No, it was a whole week long, and then I don't know, 20, 30 years ago when they came up with Thunder over Louisville. Which was the big fireworks show. That's 2 weeks before Derby. So it's now 2 weeks long. And what was just the Derby Festival for locals, now the track actually every day has its own name. Today is Derby. Yesterday was Wednesday, and it was not spelled in the traditional way. And there's the area code for telephone here is 502, so Tuesday is 50 Tuesday. Yeah. I can't remember what Monday is. I think it's... It's got a name.
What's
every day we celebrate this year.
Well, what's funny is because now I'm seeing all these posts, on Facebook and social media, it's talking about yesterday being Wednesday.
Yeah.
It's news to me literally this year that Wednesday has a name.
Yeah, it's Winsday.
Yeah, Winnsday. So that's even new, the corporate name for that Wednesday, during Derby week.
They have a lot of fun with this. And if you're not from this area, basically, if you're from Louisville, Derby is Christmas, New Year's, your birthday, your anniversary, and a couple of other holidays all rolled into one. It's just, this is our thing. We have a blast with it, which kind of leads us into not our topic today, but our bourbon today.
Absolutely. Well, that's a pretty good segue there. I'll let you take it away.
So what we are drinking today is Woodford Reserve. This is just the normal, Woodford Reserve. It's not a special blend or Master's Collection or anything like that. It's just Woodford. It's in a 1-liter bottle, but they do release a limited edition every year, and they've done this, I believe, since Woodford became the official bourbon of the Derby in 99, something like that. They do a limited edition bottle every year, and if you're watching on the video, you can see this. It has a Derby-themed poster or painting or picture or something on it. They do. There's a million of these available, so it's not one of those things where you got to go wait in line and pay a lot of money. These are $35 to $40 for the bottle.
I'm sure there's some people in town that collect these.
I collect them, right? And that's kind of a funny story. The reason that we decided we'll open this one up today, because normally you would just use these for decoration in your home or your collection or whatever. My wife bought this particular bottle for me because she said, "Oh, I know he collects these. I'll go ahead and pick it up for him." She was being very sweet, not realizing I already had it.
Yeah.
Right? So not a big deal. Once again, Woodford is a great bourbon. We've had it many times. If you have not had it, this is a fabulous go-to. But what makes it special is the bottle that it's in. This is just a beautiful bottle. I've never seen one that's not attractive.
I always associate Woodford back when, I was young and dumb and didn't have any money, pretty broke. I always associated Woodford. That was like my high class bourbon, So I remember, I can drink some Woodford. This is fancy, And
it is good. Don't sell it short. Woodford is fantastic. They are the official bourbon of the Derby, but they are not the official mint julep bourbon of the Derby. Old Forester takes that when how marketing and sponsorships, it's all a play to get these companies to give them as much money as they can.
Well, of course, it's also worth noting Woodford is owned by the same company as Old Forester.
Well, that's true. So
it's all
they have a little fun with it.
Yeah. So anyway,
what are we talking about today?
We are going to talk about the idea of enough. Specifically, what is enough? It's always a topic of conversation when clients come in, prospects come in. We're talking to folks. Just I get random questions just in conversation with friends sometimes. How much should I have saved by X age? Mm-hmm. Do I have enough to retire? Do I need $1 million to retire? Do I need 2 million, 3 million? What's my number, right? And we've talked about the magic number with the old ING commercials from back in the 90s, early 2000s or something, where everyone's walking around and
holding their number,
and there's like this magical number floating above their head, which denoted the number.
It was a great ad.
Yeah, it was a fantastic ad. But the idea was this is the amount of money that you need to be able to retire, and that was each person had their own unique number,
right? And
that's going to be a little bit of a theme today. But the idea of enough. Because everybody in this industry, and really just I'm just going to use the industry as a whole, but really it's not even just the industry. I guess humans, we always want to compare ourselves to others, to other people. Where do we rank? How do we stack up? Right. You can call it competitiveness. We're all guilty of it. Yeah. You can say it's a result of capitalism. You can call it competitiveness, whatever you want to call it. Jealousy, envy. I don't know, whatever.
All of the above.
Comparison. We always want to compare ourselves to other people.
Right.
And it's interesting because we found a ton of facts and stacks and statistics. Right? There's lies, damn lies, and statistics. So we have a lot of statistics, right? And we're going to pour through some of these numbers, and we're not going to go too terribly in the weeds, but there are some stories and some things that we have some commentary on around some of these statistics, specifically around how much net worth you should kind of have attained by certain points within your life, right? Mm-hmm. But we just want to go through the idea of enough today, because we talk about it so much with clients and trying to avoid comparing yourself to other people, but it's inevitable. Right. And so we just wanted to talk about it openly, as we do with our clients, as we do with anybody, and give you our take as we run through some of these numbers.
Okay.
So first and foremost, we got stats, and to me, the very first stat that we're going to go over, to me, was the most interesting, because we always talk about kind of the average net worth.
Right.
And so we got two different numbers. We got a median net worth and an average net worth. So for those at home that might not remember grade school elementary math, because sometimes, I wouldn't blame you if you, hey, my kids are officially at an age where I can't help them with their math homework anymore, so I'm totally guilty of this as well. But when you look at what a median number is, the median number is, if you take a group of numbers, the median number is the one that's directly in the middle.
Yeah, it's the halfway point between the top and the bottom.
It's the half. Exactly. It doesn't matter, where it is relative to, if you have a string of numbers, if you have 10 numbers lined up in a row. Doesn't matter how big or how small those numbers are. If you have 10 lined up in a row, the one that's in the middle, the one that's number 5 or number 6, that's the one that's in the middle. That's the median number, right? The average is when you calculate, you
take them all.
You take them all,
use
right?
Every number.
You're looking at the value, and you're looking to find the average value of all those numbers. So those numbers are not always going to be equal. What was interesting to me was when we started going through some of these statistics, how different the median net worth by age versus the average net worth by age was. And depending upon where you're at and how much you have saved, I don't know if this is going to make you feel better or worse.
I'm going to go with the latter, not the former.
Yeah, but it was interesting because when we started calculating these by decades, and we were looking, and we'll just kind of start running through the numbers. But for example, if you are between the ages of 35 and 44, your average net worth by age should be somewhere around $549,600. Okay. So let's just say $550,000.
Now let's remember, net worth, we're talking about total net worth.
Exactly.
Not just investable assets.
Exactly. So we're talking about the value of your house. This does not include cars. Cars are not a net asset, right?
But your house, the value of the house minus the debt that you have on it.
Yeah.
Right? That's part of your net worth.
Any kind of tangible property. Mm-hmm. We also talk about businesses. Really, this is also including like business equity as well. But for the most part, investable assets and equity in your home for 95% of people.
Right.
The median net worth for someone between the ages of 35 and 44 was $136,000.
There's reading that, it is hard to believe.
There is a 4x difference. There's a 4 times difference between the median net worth and the average net worth here. What does that tell you just off the top of immediately? How does that strike you?
It tells me that the people who are below the average are way below the average. They're pulling that median number down, right? That's what that tells me.
Well, so I would say on the flip side, I wouldn't say it's the people that are on the low end that are dragging the number down. I think it's the people on the high end that are dragging that are pulling that number up.
Yeah.
Because in my opinion, what I see from this is the difference between, let's call it the 2%ers, right?
Yeah.
The top, let's say top 5, top 10%, the disparity between, those top 5% versus the bottom 95% is so big in some cases that they're probably pulling up that average number.
Yeah.
Whereas the median in this case is probably a better, more true representation when you look at the population as a whole of kind of what the quote unquote average net worth should be. In my opinion. Now, I would suspect that most people are probably going to fall somewhere relatively in between those two numbers, because that delta, that difference between those two numbers is so big. You're talking about a $400,000 difference.
To support your point, if you look later on down through some of these stats, it's got in that 30s age group where that median is 136,000. The top 10% average 1.35 million.
Exactly.
So to your point, that very small group of people are really pulling that average number way up.
Mm-hmm. And so, once again, going back to, do I have enough? How do I stack up? What number are we looking at to even judge that metric? To even judge whether or not you do? And so this is always what's so tricky, is everyone gets caught up in trying to compare themselves to other folks. That's so terribly difficult to do when we can't even agree upon an average, a true average.
Exactly.
Because whatever way that you use to calculate an average, if you use a median or a true average, it's going to be so dramatically different in the numbers that you're comparing yourself against. And if you're coming up as someone who, was not born from money, did not come from money, and you're comparing yourself to someone who was born to 2 doctors, and and those 2 doctors were born to lawyers, right? You just won't compare, especially at that young of an age, before you're even really fully into your career. So it's just irresponsible to compare yourself to what some of those folks might have. Yeah. And I'm saying this honestly just to hopefully make kind of people feel better. Because when you look at that median number, you should feel probably pretty good about the fact, if you're kind of in your late 30s, early 40s, if you have an average, if you have a net worth of somewhere in the mid 100,000s, you're probably doing okay compared to at least half of the people, right?
To me, the way that I look at this when I'm dealing with people that are younger, so we're still 20 plus years away from retirement. 30 plus years away from retirement in some of the cases in this bracket. To me, it's not the net worth at this point in time. It's the savings rate that's actually much more important.
Absolutely.
I had a meeting with a young lady the other day. She's 35, so she's right at the beginning of this. Now, her net worth is not really that high, right? But her savings rate, she was saving, and she makes decent money. Her savings rate, in addition to the things that she wanted to do, was 25% of her salary was going into her 401k. And it's like, God love her. How aggressive is that to be able to save that much? And it's because she's not living beyond what her salary allows, right? It's not that she makes great money. It's not that her 25% is some outrageous number. It's that she's living well beneath her means. And if you think about it, a 35-year-old who's going to retire in, let's call it 30 to 35 years, but is saving 25% into her 401k plus some other savings that she wanted to do, I'm not too worried about whether she's keeping up with the Joneses or not. She is going to have a considerable amount of money more than what she needs when she actually needs to have that money. So to me, these younger people, it's all savings rate.
Someone who's making $60,000 a year with a 30% savings rate is going to have a higher net worth than someone making $100,000 with a 10% savings rate.
Absolutely.
So it's not always necessarily about how much money you make. How much money do you keep, right? How much money do you save? How much money do you invest? And how much can you get that money to work for you over time?
How many times have we said that it is shocking the number of millionaires that were teachers and cops, two professions that notoriously do not get paid what they are worth, but they don't live beyond their means. They end up with those big numbers when it comes to how much they have to spend during their retirement.
And on the flip side, you talk about stereotypes, right? But we've both worked with doctors.
Oh yeah.
That you look at strictly their income, and you would think they should have a certain asset level, but they don't, because they graduate medical school with a ton of debt. Yep. And they go basically 0 to 60. You're making pretty much not a lot of money to making a whole lot of money really, really quickly, and then they kind of get stuck keeping up with the Joneses and that sort of thing.
And I was going to say, not to pick on that particular profession, because
not at all.
We both have clients that are in that field. I've got friends that are in that field, but they do have a tendency, because they make a lot of money early in life. They have a tendency to do that, keep up with the Joneses thing. I'll pick on doctors. How many doctors finish medical school and go buy a BMW? And not a 20-year-old used one. Right? They go buy a new one. So now there's that much money going out in car payments that is not going to the savings rate to support what you're talking about. The people with the very high incomes early in life are usually not the best savers early in life.
Before we move on, I want to highlight one other thing, and
Okay.
I think I'm gleaning a little bit something extra, and this is more or less kind of a societal
right.
commentary. Because when you look, I started with the number between 35 and 44, and the median net worth being around 136, and
Right.
the average net worth being around 550,000.
Okay.
If you look at those numbers for the under 35 crowd, and that's reasonably, let's say that's going to be looking at pretty much college graduates through the age of 35.
Okay.
You're looking at a median net worth of $39,000. So roughly a fourth, somewhere around a fourth of what the median net worth is, and $183,000 on the average net worth, which is once again about somewhere between a third and a fourth of what the average net worth of someone 10 years older than them is.
Right.
What's striking to me is how much different the value is between that under 35 crowd and that 35 to 44 crowd. And I wonder, because one of the greatest indicators of wealth is how long you've been married.
Yep.
People are waiting longer to get married. Whether that's, a 2-income family or a 1.5 income family, even if you continue to be a 1-income family, the statistics show that if you are a married couple, you typically have a much greater, on average, net worth than obviously someone who is single. I wonder if that under 35 number is so low specifically because people are waiting longer and longer to get married these days.
That's an interesting commentary. I did not see that, but when you explain it, that makes a lot of sense, because 50, 60 years ago, the average age that people got married in this country was probably between 20 and 25, whereas now I'd be willing to bet that number's close to 30. So to your point, you're not in a phase of life where you can kind of stuff away money into things that create net worth as early. That's a very interesting point there.
Well, I got married at 27. Yes, 27 when I got married, not quite 28. And by today's standards, that feels young. You know, I just this is just anecdotally, right? Just seeing kind of people around me, but I don't go to very many weddings, or I had not been to very many weddings kind of as I've gotten older. For anybody, younger than 27.
Okay, to just go on with that point, you and I are almost exactly 10 years difference in age. I got married right before, just a couple months before I turned 25.
Yeah.
So a couple years younger than what you were. And when it came time, the traditional throw the bouquet and throw the garter because the single people are going to catch it, that's the next ones. There were no single people to catch it.
Yeah.
Because all of our friends were already married.
See, I was one of the first of my friends to get married.
Yeah, so it's interesting, even in that little window, how much that changed. So if you extrapolate that out now, this makes a lot of sense that there's just not that many people in their 20s who are getting married at that point. Interesting.
And that's totally anecdotal, and I was just kind of looking at that discrepancy between those two age bands, and that was just something that popped into my head as we were talking. We did not talk about that beforehand or anything. So
no, we're just winging that one.
We're just riffing things off the top of our head here, like we know what we're talking about. But when you get to the numbers between 45 and 54, the numbers start to increase dramatically because now you're starting to get into closer to your peak earning years. You're making real amounts of money. You're getting promoted a couple times, right? So that's where the average net worth jumps up to about $975,000 between 45 and 54. Now the median.
So it basically doubles.
Yeah, and then the median net worth is about $247,000, just under $250,000. So once again, a very, very large discrepancy between the median and the average net worth of someone in that age band. I'm obviously I'm not quite into that age band yet, but you can see that's really when that compounding interest that you've been saving, that you started saving for in your 20s, you really don't start to see the fruits of that until let's say 15, 20 years later, when, oh, wait, my compounding interest has now grown to a point where my compounding interest on top of my compounding interest is really starting to create something real.
I think that's the most difficult thing with convincing yourself or your adult children or your friends, whatever, to start investing and invest consistently when you're young.
At an early age.
It's really tough to do when you're in your 20s. You finish college or you finish your trade school or whatever you do. If you went to college, there's pretty good likelihood that you're coming out of school with some debt.
Even a lot more today than what I had.
Absolutely, yeah.
So to be fair,
college is so much more expensive now than it was when I was in school.
And we can do another episode on whether that's worth it or not. And
that would be a fun one to do.
Oh, so. You can hear some rants on my opinions on college. But yeah.
But you've got this college debt. You are probably trying to save your money so that you can buy your first home or something like that. You're getting married. Many people are still having kids at this age, and if you don't have kids, you do not understand how expensive children are. It is what it is. And you know what? If you're not married or having kids yet, or even if you're married, you're probably still trying to have a lot of fun when you're at this age. Whereas now my idea of fun is sitting on my front porch and going to bed early. Right, kind of dating myself, but when you're in this age,
hey, I'm 10 years behind you, and that sounds really fun.
You're still having fun. You're still going out on Fridays and Saturday nights and things like that, and that costs money, right? So it's really difficult to convince people, that you should be saving at that age when they've got all those other things that are hitting them, and they listen to somebody and they put a little bit of money in a Roth IRA, and it just wasn't growing very fast, so they kind of stopped.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like you don't realize the value of saving a few bucks when you're in your early mid-20s until, to your point, you get into your early to mid-40s, and the compounding is starting to do something now.
That's actually a fantastic analogy. I'm going to use another analogy to kind of add or, extend your analogy there a little bit. So people talk about like going to the gym. We just kind of got through the beginning of the year. We talk about gym membership spiking on January 1st, right? Everyone joins the gym because they have the New Year's resolution that, I'm going to.
And by February 1st, they've stopped going.
I'm going to join a gym and I'm going to magically drop all of this weight.
Right.
And then you get to February 1st, and well, maybe you still haven't dropped everything that you were hoping to drop, or there wasn't a a magic pill. Well, actually, maybe now you can get a magic shot, but that's
But, no, they have a pill for that now. I saw an ad for it.
They probably do. but you start going to the gym, and you go to a gym for a few weeks, or maybe even a month, and you don't see those immediate results. Right. So what do? You quit. You give up. You think, oh, this isn't working for me. You don't get 6-packs in a month. You don't get a 6-pack. You don't get 6-pack abs in a month. It takes consistency over a long period of time. Investing is very much the same thing.
Absolutely. Good analogy.
You don't realize the fruits of your labor in a Roth IRA, for example, a year after you open it. Mm-hmm. You realize the fruits of your labor 20 years after you open it, 30, 40, right? And it's the consistency of continuing to add, continuing to save into that Roth IRA, and it can be whatever investment vehicle. I'm just using that as an example. But you start at a young age with $1,000 contribution, $50 a month. It doesn't sound like a lot, and it's not a lot, right? But you take that $50, and the next year you make it 75, then you make it $100 a month, right? And you start grow, and you're consistent with it. And sure enough, after a couple of years, you look back and you say, oh, okay, this is a little bit more than what I remember putting in, right? And then you look back a few years later. One of my favorite things to do with younger clients is we have the ability to track their historical net worth. Yeah. And so, especially if I've had younger clients, and I'll define younger as younger than 40, right? But if they've been a client for, let's say, 3-4 years, the difference is usually astronomical for those clients in a 3-4 year period. And so I always try to go back and show them what their historical net worth in our systems look like, because I want them to appreciate how far they've come in such a short amount of time by doing the things that we talked about 3-4 years ago, or however long they might have become a client, right? But however long that we have the ability to track their net worth, is very, very important for me to show them that progress, because when you're kind of living the day-to-day, you're raising kids, you're working, you're not really thinking, maybe you're seeing the value of your accounts go up, but you don't really stop to appreciate maybe how far along you've come in a very short amount of time. And so if you start working, you start getting a promotion or two, and you increase your savings rate just a little bit, and maybe you get married, and now you have 2 incomes coming in, to track that net worth is really a fantastic exercise to illustrate it doesn't necessarily take decades to start making progress. And if you start to see progress within a matter of 2-3 years, imagine how big that progress can be over the course of the next 10 to 20.
Right. I had another analogy popped in my head while you were telling that story. Last night, I was sitting on my front porch relaxing, and I had my iPad out, and I was reading something, and the thing popped up, picture memories or something like that. And it was pictures of my kids. Now, my youngest child graduates from high school. Well, today's the 30th, so he graduates from high school next month, about 3 weeks from now. He and my older son are both taller than me. It is amazing to me how much bigger they are than what they were in these pictures that I'm looking at, because I see them every single day. You know what I mean? I don't notice the growth because I'm looking at them constantly. But I look at a picture and it popped up. It was from 2016. It was 10 years ago. They looked like little bitty kids. You know what I mean? They were tiny. And if you are looking at it from the outside, if you only look at them every few years, you see that growth. But if you're looking at it every single day, like Mom and I are, you don't notice it because it's so incremental. And I think that's a very similar thing to this too. If you're sitting there staring at it going, why is it not getting bigger? It is. You just don't notice it because it's doing those little incremental amounts.
Yeah. I'll skip ahead to 65 to 74.
Okay.
65 specifically because that's usually the kind of the quote unquote
kind of the magic number for a lot of people.
That's the magic retirement date for a lot of folks. That's when you qualify for Medicare, and so that's usually the age that most people tend to circle for retirement. Whether that's right or wrong, we've done podcasts on that before, but it is what it is. But when you look at the average net worth of 65 to 74, it's showing 1.794. So let's round up and say 1.8 million. The median net worth is 410,000. So if you come into the door at the age of 65 with an $800,000 net worth, do you have enough? Maybe.
Depends.
Maybe not. But who are we comparing you to?
Right.
Are we comparing you to the median, or are we comparing you to the average? And so this is why it's so tricky, and it's really just fool's gold to compare yourself to other people in totally different situations. Another thing that's important to note that we've not even touched upon, we're talking to you from Louisville, Kentucky.
Ooh, good one.
So the numbers that we might highlight at 1.8 or 410,000. Well, that 410 in Louisville, Kentucky might stretch you quite a bit farther than it will in, let's say, San Francisco or LA.
Bingo.
Right?
Good example.
So it's also important to remember these are national averages. These are not necessarily specific to any region of the country.
Right.
But anyway, going in to further my point, right? You're 65, you're looking to retire. Let's say you have $800,000 net worth. Is it enough? It might not feel like enough to you because you have friends that are maybe doing better. Right. You probably have a lot of friends that are doing worse, but you don't pay attention to them.
Yeah.
Or you don't know them, or you've kind of stopped associated with them, or you just don't feel like that those are your comparisons. Everyone always wants to look up. No one ever looks down. Everyone always wants to look up. And it's human nature, right? We always want what we can't have, right? So you always compare to people that are maybe doing better than you. And in reality, if you have $800,000 at 65, you're doing pretty well. According to the numbers, according to the stats, you're well above the median net worth. So you're doing much better than well over 50% of the population. Right. Okay. And you're really not too far away from the average net worth. I mean, you're doing okay. And once again, I think that average net worth is so skewed by the people in the top 5% that are bringing that number up that you really can't even compare to most of those folks anyway.
Interesting. You were talking about that. What is that average being pulled up by? Okay, the top in your 60s, the top 10%, the average net worth in that top 10% is $4.6 million. Those people are definitely skewing that average, right? They're pulling it way up. But let me kind of go back to what you were saying a minute ago. Is that 800,000 enough? I know I'm speaking for you when I say this. There's clients that I work with that 800,000 is not going to cut it because of the lifestyle that they're looking for, right? They're going to have considerably more than that. But a client popped into my mind that we started working with, I don't know, about this time last year, I guess, that they informed me when we first sat down and talked, they were retiring on January 1. Not we'd like to, not we're thinking about it. It was we're doing it. It doesn't matter what you tell us, we're doing it. Okay, well, you kind of you're painting me into a box a little bit. And I said, okay, fine, let's have a look at what you got. So I start looking through things, and they're way below this average, way below this average. And the first thing that hit me was, ooh, how do I break this news to them? But then we started walking through their lifestyle, and we started looking at the way that they go about things, the amount of money that it costs to just go through their day-to-day life, what their bucket list items look like. And I'm sitting here going, they got more money than they need, because they have such a simple lifestyle. That's what they like. Their idea of a massive expenditure would be replacing the screens on their patio, on their deck. That's because they're just very simple in what they're looking for, as opposed to others who are looking for something much more extravagant, but it requires more money. So that's the reason I hate that keep up with the Joneses mentality. When the potential client comes in and says, am I keeping up? Am I on pace with everybody else? Who cares whether you're on pace with everybody else? Are you on pace for what you want?
Are you going out to fancy steakhouses every week?
Right.
If you are, then maybe you're not. Maybe you are falling behind a little bit. But if you're not doing that and you go out to eat maybe once a month to Olive Garden,
we just threw them under the bus, didn't we?
Yeah, hey, and actually, I love Olive Garden. I don't care. Fine Italian dining for me. I do not care.
There's nothing Italian about it, and I love it. God help me, I do. It's good. It's not good for you, but it's very good.
Once again, there was a time in my life when Olive Garden was fancy.
That was fine dining,
okay,
right?
So there's absolutely no Olive Garden hate on this end of the table. But all that to say, it's all about your lifestyle.
Yeah.
And this is one reason why I hate the way that our industry portrays retirement and all of the advertisements that they run. All these people on golf courses and yachts and sailboats.
Right.
And the vast majority of people, well, I'll say everyone in the state of Kentucky, nobody here owns a sailboat.
No.
Okay. I mean, maybe a few.
There's a handful.
There's a very, very small handful, right?
They also
maybe.
live in 7 different states. So
and the sailboat's not sitting in Louisville,
Exactly.
Kentucky. So, but that's just not a realistic goal for the vast number of people that are looking to retire. Most people don't want or care to have a country club membership.
Right.
They don't look to go play golf every day. That's not what their retirement is going to look like. Most people don't want a sailboat. They don't live near water, and they don't even know how to use a sailboat, right? I don't. I've never been on one before in my life.
I know in theory how it works, but I've never been on one.
I've never done it.
If I was put in charge of a sailboat, there's a pretty good chance people are going to drown, right?
Yeah. So that once again gets back to, is it enough? What is enough? Okay. What is the idea of having enough? And really, you should not be using that metric to compare yourself against other people. You should not be using any of these metrics. You should not be looking at the average net worth, because we see these articles all the time in our business. We come across them. I've had clients, kind of talk about reading some of these articles. How much money should you have saved by X amount of, by X time, by X age? It doesn't matter. It really, really does not matter. I'm also going to talk to my business owner clients.
Okay.
Or any business owners just in generally listen. Because you all are a select different breed. Because
notice he says you, and he's looking at me while he says that. If you're watching this,
well, I'm also looking. if there's a mirror, I'd be looking at myself too, right? But business equity is very much a part of this as well.
Absolutely.
Because for most people that are business owners, their biggest asset isn't going to be their home. It's not going to be their 401k. It's going to be their business. Right. What is the value of your business if you were to go potentially have a sale event or some type of a buyout event, or whenever you go to retire? Mm-hmm. Is there equity in your business that you have available to be able to sell that to someone and monetize your biggest asset, which is your business? Right. And of course, the way that you evaluate that, the way you evaluate it every year when you do your taxes might be different than the true valuation when you actually go to sell. But that's very, very important to remember as well, because not everybody is starting at the exact same place in their journey, in their lifetime. I started, when we started this business, I was in my late 30s, 37, I think, 38, something like that. Not 37, so mid to late 30s. You're 10 years older than me, right? So you stared a
totally different situation. Exactly. Right.
When we started this company, you were a little bit older than me, so you kind of started in your journey a little bit later than I did. And I know other folks that started before I did. I wish I started before I did. I'm sure you feel the exact same way, right? Yeah. We should have started earlier, but that's neither here nor there. But that's our biggest asset. Yep. Is going to be our business.
I want to address exactly what you're talking about. The people who are business owners who are thinking about being business owners out there. I have had this conversation multiple times, which means I've had it too many times. I'm talking to people about how we're going to fund their retirement, what their retirement looks like, and they're business owners. And I start asking those questions about, what is your business worth? What's our out strategy? And I've had too many people say, well, my business is not worth anything when I sell it. And I find that perplexing, right? No, there's just nothing about my business that would be valuable to the next guy. Okay, so I believe them. I've looked into it. What I would say is, to those of you who you still have a ways to go on your journey and you are business owners, you need to find a way to make your business sellable. There needs to be an out strategy, because, to your point, Eric, the single biggest asset that you most likely have if you have a successful business is the business. It's worth more than your house. It's worth more than your 401k or all that other stuff. But you need to find a way early to make that business valuable. Do you need to add a product line to what you do? Do you need to bring in partners? And what do you need to do to make that business sellable, because it's valuable to the next person down the road? If you're not doing that, it is amazing how much you are selling yourself short.
Are you self-employed or are you a business owner?
Right.
Do you have a job where you just pay yourself, or do you own a business that generates revenue.
Right.
Right.
Good way to phrase that.
Yeah. And so if you are a business owner, that's very, very important to understand as you get closer to retirement. How do you monetize that? And how do you create or make that some type of a sellable asset that will fund your retirement? Even maybe aside from that, how do you structure your business maybe where you stay on, but you don't work, but you still generate an income from that business? Do you have someone that you can bring in as a partner or, get bought out over time, be some type of a silent partner? Maybe that's an option too, because so many times what we and we're guilty of this in this podcast episode today. We're talking about how much money people need to have, but really, what do people live on for the most part? Income.
Yeah, income.
And the only reason,
I see where you're going.
And the only reason we're talking about the level of assets here is because we need those assets to generate
that income, right?
To generate income. So if you own a business and you can continue to work or continue to own the business and have it pay you, you're still able to generate retirement income from a business that you own, even though you might not be necessarily an active participant in that business in the day-to-day operations. Yeah. So maybe that's part of your plan, part of your succession plan. Whatever it is, you just need to find a way to monetize whatever you're doing in retirement. whatever you have, you need to find a way to pay yourself income.
And by the way, if you're sitting there hitting your head against a wall going, I can't figure out how to make my business sellable at some point in time down the road, you maybe need to get some consultations with somebody, have it analyzed, talk to a business coach. There's any number of different ways you can go about it, but please make sure, I love the way you phrase that. Do you own a business or are you self-employed? Because there's a big difference between the two. All right.
So, where to go now? Here's another chart that I found very interesting. Okay. And these are all statistics that came out a couple weeks ago, by the way, here in the month of April of 2026. Am I behind? So kind of looking at honest benchmarks for, instead of looking at it from a monetary value, or specifically a monetary value, let's look at it in reference to your salary. Okay. And see what kind of thoughts you might have about this. So you're looking at the age of 30. If you take your salary, from a conservative standpoint, your net worth should be somewhere, 0.5% of your salary, or about 50% of whatever your salary is. And an aggressive target for your net worth should be about 1x your salary, 1 times your salary. Okay. So if you're making $100,000, your net worth should be somewhere around $100,000.
Between 50 and 100, right?
Yeah, somewhere around, between $50 and $100,000. If you're 35, it should be somewhere between 1x and 2x your salary. If you're 40, it should be somewhere between 2x and 3x. If you're 45, it should be somewhere between 3x and 4x your salary. And you can kind of see those numbers increase. And by the time you get to the age of 65, whatever your salary is, it should be, probably somewhere between 8x, 8 times and 10 times your salary at the age of retirement.
Right. So let's go back and relay that back to what we were saying a minute ago. These are benchmarks. So if you're asking that question that we've said many times, we hate this question, am I keeping up? Right? To which we all automatically respond, who cares? Yeah. Right? Are you on pace for what you want? But if you insist on asking yourself that question, okay, if you want to benchmark that, this is actually not a bad one. So it's roughly, somewhere for every 10 years, or excuse me, every 5 years, this is going up. It's increasing by 1 times your salary, right? Till you get into your, your 60s. It's not a bad benchmark, but I still want to go back and stress, what does your retirement look like? That's really, really hard to wrap your head around when you're 30, right? Yeah. Because it's as far away as you are old. But when you're getting into your 40s, especially when, the kids start looking at moving out of the house, and now you should have a good idea of what retirement looks like. And now you can start saying, okay, here's some of the things I'd like to do. Here's what I'd like my day-to-day to be like. Now you can start figuring out what's that going to cost me. And now you can tell whether you're on pace for what you want, not what Joe Average out there wants. There's just too many stories out there that we could tell of people who want such radically different things. If they compare themselves to each other, they'd both be failures, even though they're very much on track.
Yeah, and I think once again, this is kind of just basic, very generic benchmark numbers, but some things to keep in mind. Your salary is never going to be constant throughout your lifetime. It's going to change. It's going to go up. It might even go down a couple times. You go to start a business, you're probably going to take a
you're going to take a pay cut.
You're probably going to take a pay cut for a while, maybe 1, 2, 3 years. Who knows? Is what it is, but that's okay. But when you're taking that pay cut, on paper, your net worth might be more than 2x your salary, for example.
Right.
But that's because you took a pay cut. So keeping some of these numbers in check to some degree and understanding that, maybe when you get to 65, you're making more money than you've ever made in your life.
Right.
You might not have 8 to 10x salary when you get to 65 because you're at the peak. You're at the top of your peak earning years when you go to retire. So if you're making the most money that you've ever made and you're trying to justify having, I need 10x salary, but you're making the highest salary that you've ever made before, that's not necessarily always a fair assumption to put on you for how much money you need to have heading into retirement.
Just keep in mind, it's a benchmark. It's just something to compare yourself to. The issue that we have is, should you be comparing yourself? You know what I mean? Or should you be looking at what I personally would like? So,
yeah. And going back to, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to kind of start wrapping it up, but if you got another point.
Well, the only thing I was going to talk about is kind of the overall net worth percentile.
Okay.
rankings.
Yeah.
And this is, if you really want to get, maybe to me, this is probably a pretty good indicator of where you are monetarily relative to the overall population. Now, this is kind of removing age bands. We're not talking about age bands. We're not talking about, anything else, right? We're just talking about strictly the amount of assets that you have from a net worth standpoint. If your net worth is about $193,000,
okay,
keep in mind, this is including the value, equity of your home, right? Business equity, things like that. If your net worth is about $193,000, you are in the 50th percentile. You are right at the median line.
Yeah.
Okay, for all Americans, you are a quote unquote middle American at that point, whatever that term might mean, right? But you've got some modest home equity, you have some savings, but that's your kind of overall net worth is less than $200,000.
Okay,
I don't know how that strikes you. That seems low to me, though.
It does seem low to me, but I go back to when you're looking at these net worth for these ages, keep in mind, depending on the part of the country that you live in, there's some pretty wild swings in whether you're actually kind of at that midpoint for your peer group, if you will. So, grain of salt on these.
But what's interesting to me is the difference between the 25th percentile and the 50th percentile.
Yes, that's a huge swing.
The 25th percentile is $15,000.
Yeah.
$15,000 net worth, and you're in the 25th percentile. There are people less than that.
Less than that, right? Which
exactly.
Is
and we're obviously talking about adults. This is adult age. The adult population.
And you know what? If you just finished whatever education you're going to do, you just graduated from college or you finished your trade school and you're just getting into the workforce, if you've got a net worth less than $15,000, don't beat yourself up. You're just getting started.
But you're also not 25% of the population.
Correct. That's exactly right.
And so that's why it's instructive for a lot of folks, because when you get to the 75th percentile, that's $600,000.
Yeah.
If you've got a $600,000 net worth, you are in the top 25% of all Americans. A lot of people in that percentile don't necessarily feel like it. But if you're trying to use a net metric to determine, do I have enough? How do I stack up against the rest of the population? If you have a net worth over $600K, you're
stacking up.
you're in the top 25%. You're a 25%er.
Yep.
Right? If you have a net worth of over 1.9, and once again, it's amazing how much bigger these numbers get as you move up this percentile. But if you've got a net worth of $1.9 million, you're in the 90th percentile.
Yeah.
You're a top 10 percenter. In order to be a top 5 percenter, you need a net worth of about $3.8 million. So it's interesting, you hear the questions, do I need $1 million? Do I need $2 million to retire? I have this magical number in my head that I have to save for. And, for a lot of people, it's somewhere usually around, at least people that come into us, $1.5, $2 million. Dude, you're in the 85th to 90th percentile right there. You're doing pretty well. Yeah. You're okay. Unless your spending is so radically high that it can't support your lifestyle through the end of your retirement, in which case, that might be another, you have other issues that we have to discuss more so than the value of your assets.
And once again, I go back to that cost of living area. Here in Louisville, Kentucky, we are in one of the lower cost of living areas. So when we have the client come in that's over $600,000, hey, you're in the top 25%. But that's keeping in mind that there's a lot of people pulling that number up that live in places like Southern California or New York or Dallas or Miami. They're pulling that number way up. That $600,000 buying power here is a lot more valuable than what it is in some of those other places. So kind of keep that in mind. This is why you shouldn't be comparing yourself.
Yeah, and we talked about the people at the top bringing that average net worth up so high. Once again, the 95th percentile is $3.8 million net worth. The 99th percentile is...
So the top 1%, which is in the news, right?
They have a net worth of $16.7 million. So the difference between 95 and 99th percentile is about $13 million.
Yeah.
$13.1 million.
So what, 4 or 5 times the difference there?
We talk about that 1% is really bringing up
they're pulling the whole
the
thing
average
up,
value. So that's why you need to be really, really careful looking at the average net worth on a lot of these articles that you read, because the average net worth does not tell the whole story, and trying to get caught up in comparing yourself to some average that is being pulled up by the top 1%. That's difficult to do, and you're really kind of setting yourself up for failure. Life is all about expectations, right? And so you want to make sure you're putting. Everybody should have goals.
Absolutely,
they should be lofty goals, but they also need to be realistic. And so it's important to understand kind of who you are and where you're at, and understand that you can put yourself in a position to have more than enough, as long as you're not basing your enough on Instagram and TV and anything else that you might be, looking at or watching or trying to compare yourself to your next door neighbor who appears like they have everything, but maybe they have a lot more debt than you realize, right?
So I'm speaking to that same person that I was referring to earlier, who is 35 years old and is saving in total more than 25% of their income. And you think that's outrageous. And I made a comment. I said, hey, make sure you check out the social media stuff that we do. And she made one of the most revolutionary comments. I'm not on social media at all. She's not on Facebook. She's not on Instagram. She doesn't do TikTok. She's on none of these. And it's
good
like,
for
you know what? First of all, good for you. And second of all, you know what? She's not tempted to compare herself to what she finds out there, because she's simply not looking at it. It's like, that might be the best lesson, is just don't look, and then you're not going to be tempted to compare yourself.
So, any parting thoughts as we wrap things up?
No, once again, my big one is, if you compare yourself to others, you're never going to get to the goal, because when you get better than this other one, now there's somebody above that.
There's always somebody above you.
So you're never going to be satisfied. And, from what I've seen other people do, when you start getting more financially or higher net worth than what some of these other people are, there's a tendency for some people to become a little arrogant. That is not a healthy way to live. You know what I mean? Just don't worry about what other people are worth. Worry about, am I saving enough to get to my goals? Do I have a plan for my life? How many times have we said it? It always comes back to, you need a good financial plan for these things, right? But you have to know what you want, right? What your goals are in order to get a good financial plan. So just, think about these things. That's, instead of just winging it, that's where you get frustrated with it. So
Woodford.
Oh, I hadn't drank regular Woodford in forever, right? I've gotten too uppity, baby, because I have so many other selections. I'd forgotten how good this stuff is. It's just pure butter and butterscotch and caramel. Oh, it's so good.
Well, that's what's interesting, especially maybe in Louisville, because we're kind of bourbon capital of the world, right?
We're privileged to have lots of other options.
So we've got so many other options, and so many other options that are maybe not as readily available and more. Really, I don't want to say prestigious, but really more prestigious, more rare, harder to find, harder to get. So it appears that maybe they're going to be better, bigger, and better, and more important. And a lot of those have come with higher price tags too. You can get Woodford anywhere you go.
You know,
this is not the double oak. This is not the double
Right.
oak. This is just basic
Just Woodford. It's a fancy bottle, but what's inside of it is just regular Woodford. As you were saying that, it was dawning on me. We were on a cruise earlier this year out in the Caribbean, and I sat down at a bar and I said, I'd like an old fashioned. And he said, well, what kind of bourbon would you like? And I remember thinking, Woodford's good enough for a old fashioned. And it was, by the way. But I'm sitting here going, you know what I should have done? Just a little pour of that Woodford, and I'd be very happy because it's good. And if you noticed, when I was getting fairly low, I put 1 drop of water in it just to see what it did. It's not as good.
Yeah.
It brought out some spices and things, and it kind of killed that caramel butter flavor. This one's just good straight out of the bottle.
Well, you don't need it either. You don't need to water it down.
No, as far as, cutting it in order to get the proof down, you don't need it. I believe this is about 91 proof. Is that right?
It's usually, yeah. It's
90.4
right
actually.
Yeah.
So this is not very high proof, right? You don't need to cut it because it burns. I was just trying to see if it changed the flavor, and it did. And I don't think it changed it in a good way. Just pour this in a glass and enjoy it.
Readily available and easy to find does not mean that it's bad.
That's exactly right.
It really is excellent. I mean, it's an excellent bourbon. Yeah. It really is. We do get so caught up sometimes because we're looking at something new and fancy and unique and hard to find and expensive that, it's good. It's just really good.
There is, so tomorrow is May 2026, and there is a new release coming out next month. I've seen it. I haven't seen the actual thing. I've seen pictures. The bottle and the presentation are truly one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. Eagle Rare 30 year.
Really?
$12,500 retail. And I'm sitting here going, you know what? I guarantee you that is really, really good. Is it worth $12,500? Let's just say you're a billionaire. You could throw away that kind of money. Is it really worth that much? And I'm sitting here tasting this at, $45? And I'm going, this is pretty outstanding. And most people are not going to be harmed by spending that kind of money on a bottle. And it's a 1 liter bottle, remember? Yeah. So this is, a third bigger than what most whiskey bottles are.
Well, it's interesting too, because what do I always say? Kind of my sweet spot is that $40 to $50 range, and it's really hard for me to find something above $50 that justifies going above $50.
This is a perfect example of why you believe
this is a perfect example. I mean, you give me a bottle of Woodford, I'm not going to go wrong.
Nope.
No one is ever going to come to my house and I'm going to say, hey, I have Woodford. No, I don't want Woodford. No one ever says that. No one ever says no to Woodford.
And for the record,
it's a great, reliable, easy pour.
As I just said, it's really, really good to just pour it into a glass and drink it neat. But I've tried this in any number of different cocktails. Never had one that this was like, oh, that's not a good bourbon for this cocktail. It's good in all of them. So if you were going to have that one go-to bourbon that you keep on your shelf for when people come over, you're not going to go wrong with this one. That's certainly true.
Yeah. Then I'll also go back. One of my top threes is double oats. Yeah. I mean, so this is that comes from this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So
anyhow,
all right.
Good place to wrap up. So if you have questions around whether or not you have enough, if you feel like you have questions around whether or not you are able to retire, want to retire early maybe, and have questions around what you need or, what constitutes enough to be able to do that, right? Please give us a call. Go to our website, fwbpartners.com. Schedule a call with us. Shoot us an email. We would love to chat with you further. Please review any of our content. If anything that we hit struck a nerve with you, or maybe is something that you think somebody else would benefit from hearing, please feel free to share. We greatly appreciate it. And until next time.
And happy Derby.
Happy Derby.